Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Tarek O'Dali from Business Review, and I will be your host. It is our pleasure to have Appian with us today, who'll be presenting this webinar titled Transform Your Product Lifecycle in the Digital Era. Today's guest speakers are Evie Cohen, Global Pharma and Life Sciences Lead, and Wayne McDonnell, Principal PwC. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar platform On24. You'll notice this webinar is fully browser-based. If you do disconnect for any reason, please simply click on the link you received via email to rejoin the session. In order to ask questions, you can send those in via the questions widget. Just type them into the box at the top left-hand corner of your screen there and click submit. We'll try to allocate some time towards the end of the webinar to address any of the questions or thoughts you may have for us. If you click on the green resource list widget at the bottom of your screen, you'll find some relevant files and links in there to click on. Go ahead and interact with that. And you can also use the yellow help widget if you do require technical assistance. You're also free to move, resize, and maximize any of those windows in front of you if you'd like to get a better view of the slides. But now, please allow me to welcome today's first speaker, Wayne. Wayne, over to you.
Tarek, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today to talk about some really important topics for the life sciences industry. And I'd really like to thank Evie and the Appian team for having me here as part of this webinar today. The title of today's webinar is, relates to the product life cycle in the life sciences industry. And here we're not talking about any application, product lifecycle related. We're really thinking about the product journey from initial discovery and development all the way through launch, commercialization, return, end of life management, and all of the business processes that are in place today to support that product lifecycle. So as we think about that topic, I was thinking about in life sciences, what does that product lifecycle really look like today? When I think about the life sciences industry, so pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device companies as well, we've been one of the most innovative and one of the most successful industry sectors in terms of discovering and bringing new products to market. We can do so very rapidly. I know life cycles or development times may vary a bit between, for example, device and pharmaceutical, but still, when you think about that on a relative basis, the number of innovations, number of new products we're able to bring to market, it's incredible. And the impact that we have on patients' lives is even more incredible. But when I think about how we've done so over the last 20 to 30 years, and where we are today in terms of our business processes and the degree to which we've enabled those business processes, my personal opinion is that we're still left with a fair number of rather, at best, semi-automated, but really rather manual, complex, cross-functional business processes to try to achieve the end goals, to try to achieve these rapid innovation and launch cycles that we've been able to achieve. And so just think about this for a second in product development, for example. Getting access to, gathering, capturing critical data that have to go into filings as we progress from development to clinical, to the regulatory filing. How kind of automated, quick, easy, right first time is that in your company? I'm going to guess that not many of you say we've got that down. Now, that's still a rather kind of manual, very cross-functional process. You're handing off data between different groups and different systems. There are probably multiple opportunities for transcription error, et cetera. Think about how we've had to manage clinical trials today in this ever-expanding global reach of our clinical trial footprint. The coordination activities with CROs, investigators, patients even. Again, what kind of processes do we have in place today to really manage all of those clinical trials effectively? I keep going on and thinking about launch readiness, commercialization, I spend a lot of my time in the clinical trial supply chain and the commercial supply chain. When I think about still how we release products today, and I'm going to talk a bit about this more later on in today's webinar. We think about the multiple handoffs of data and documents between a contract manufacturer, the brand owner, the QC organization, supply chain. All of these groups still, perhaps accessing documents in document management systems or accessing data in one-off systems, but very infrequently do we see these systems being integrated, the data handoffs being quote-unquote automated, and the possibility for error really minimized. When I think about, again, the typical product's journey across its life cycle and what we do today to continue to try to manage that life cycle, and I think about some of the challenges that we continue to face, and I'll just touch on two of these from an industry perspective. All sectors of the life sciences industry continue to be challenged with being able to bring products to market as fast as we can. And again, with all of the success of the past in mind, I think competition around the globe is really putting a lot of pressure on our ability to bring products to market faster, right first time, et cetera. And then there's also, I think more so than ever in the past, this issue of cost. And what does it really cost to bring products to market? We're being challenged by that in all regards. So when I think of the way that we've been able to manage product development, commercialization, end-of-life management, in terms of competition, speed, cost, and then of course the third factor that goes along with that is all the regulation, the increased regulation that we face as we go to more and more jurisdictions and countries around the world. I think the challenges are mounting, and as you'll see as we go through here, I think the time is right for us really to think about kind of digital cloud-based alternatives and ways to think about how we can increase the level of automation of these business processes, increase speed, decrease opportunity for error, et cetera. So again, I think this is a very interesting and exciting backdrop to introducing this notion of digital cloud-enabled business process automation. But with that high-level view of where some of these challenges lie, again, personally, I spend a lot of my time in operations, supply chain, and all the related technologies. I think about these very two specific cases to really highlight where some of these issues are today. You think about what we do across clinical and supply chain, for example, to plan what are we really going to need to support clinical trials on a global scale. We've got groups in a clinical development area who are developing project plans, typically in Word documents, perhaps in a system somewhere, but those are disconnected typically between them and the group that's responsible for planning the manufacture and supply of the clinical trial materials. And they're certainly disconnected from the CROs, who are going to play a big role in receiving inventory from the brand owner and managing the logistics, the inventory management and the shipment of all that inventory. Add on to this, in the world of clinical trials, there's an increasing amount of regulation and focus on the returns and reconciliation process. It's one thing to know what we've made to support clinical trials, what we've sent out through the CRO and investigator network, but as brand owners, we're being called upon increasingly to make sure that we know where all of the primary and comparator inventory ends up ultimately, and being able to prove that out, being able to get those materials back. Now think about that network of brand owner, CRO, investigator. I say that there's an opportunity to really stitch together that collection of parties, all of the functions and departments that they represent, and all of the systems that they work in to affect clinical trials on a global scale. Likewise, very much is the same for a commercial supply. And again, I'm going to dive into this a lot deeper toward the end of today's webinar. But think about all the activities from manufacturing across the brand owner, its contract manufacturers, QC, gathering all the test data, both in paper and system form, a QA, kind of orchestrating the review of all of that documentation to try to identify where are the discrepancies and deviations, initiate the investigations and closure of those deviations, accessing and analyzing any additional data that may be required to ultimately make the final decision on release. Again, these are two prime examples of processes that I would still describe that, although they may be enabled by systems today, they're probably still enabled by a multitude of independent systems, and there's still a fair amount of reliance on individual effort, individual and independent documents, and there's a need to be able to access those documents and all of the critical data within. That today there's still a lot of effort, there's a lot of opportunity for error, transcription error, not accessing the right data, and certainly I think we could say without too much quantification that the time that this is taking and the cost is certainly not as optimized as it could be. So when I think about, again, the challenges that we face going forward, where we are today in terms of our level of automation, system enablement and integration and sophistication, this is why I say I think now is the time more so than ever for us as an industry to really consider making best use of tools that are becoming available via cloud-based, digital-based platforms. And I think my personal perspective, as I've seen this, the industry evolve over the last, let's say, 10 years, the willingness, the openness to work on cloud-based applications and databases, et cetera, and really being open to and thinking about the opportunities that we have now from a host of digital solutions. I've never seen the interest and the willingness to work in this digital cloud-based environment as high as it is today. So that's the first good sign that there is some opportunity for us to consider where some of these solutions may lie to help address these complex business processes. But really, I think we have to think strategically about this, and it's not just a matter of saying I've found a tool, or I think I know a new opportunity to adopt a cloud-based or a digital-based platform. I think when we think about these very complex, challenging business processes, we really do have to map out all of the functions, all of the systems, and the data, information, and records that are required to successfully manage the business process in question. I think there's some fundamentals that we're going to need to be able to optimize those business processes, and that's really around a really robust workflow, enabling a broad set of functions with very robust analytics, and really making the information relevant to that business process visible with some very crisp reports, metrics, et cetera. In order to do that, we've got to be able to create visibility to these business processes, what's happening at various steps of the business process, the functions that are responsible primarily for their step in the business process, but also being able to have upstream and downstream visibility to what's going on as well. That visibility on its own will kind of create and really foster, I believe, a new level of collaboration that we haven't seen yet today to really, again, increase speed, increase accuracy, decrease errors across these complex processes. And ultimately, that's going to leave us with a level of integration, again, that we just haven't been able to achieve by deploying independent, disconnected, disparate systems, if you will. Ultimately, what we're talking about here is a new level of automation and optimization of these very complex cross-functional business processes. Again, I think we could probably spend an entire webinar's time talking about the challenges that our industry faces, both macro and perhaps even very specific to our subsector of the industry. I think we can all point to a multitude of business processes that have grown up that are still very multifunctional, it's certainly complex. So now's the time for us to consider these cloud-based, digital-based opportunities to really drive a step change in how we manage those complex business processes. So with that in mind, we'll open up our first poll question here. Tarek, would you like to take us through this? Not only the poll question itself, but how best to respond, and then also the results.
Of course. Thank you very much. So this is the interactive poll question, the first of 3 we'll be running in today's session. Audience members, please, if you could, select the answer that's most relevant to you and hit the submit button at the bottom. So this question is, my biggest challenge with business process management is, and here are the options: access to critical data and documents, that's the first one; accurate transmission of data across functions, systems, and records; 2, ability to analyze data to make informed decisions, that's number 3; efficient collaboration and workflow across functions, number 4; or all of the above, that's the 5th option there. If you could, please go ahead and select the answer most relevant to you and hit submit. Wayne, if you could maybe just provide some more context on this, or talk about maybe what you're planning to, what you're expecting to see as a result.
Yeah, thanks, Tarek. I think me personally, I would have hit all of the above. But I really think more and more, I see the accurate transmission of data across functions, systems, and records as really being an Achilles heel here in a lot of the business processes that we're left to manage. I think through various either human or some kind of suboptimal integration of independent systems, we can achieve a certain level of access to information or a certain level of analytics, for example. But I still say that we're left with a lot of holes in the system that have yet to be plugged. And I think again, accurate transmission of data and information is one of the biggest concerns.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that's given the audience enough time to vote. I would like to remind the audience that we are going to be hosting a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So if you do have any questions for today's speakers, please go ahead and submit those. Just type them into the box at the top left-hand corner of the screen and hit submit. Okay, thank you very much for taking part in this poll. Let's have a look at those results. Okay, so yeah, I think what you expected there has happened. All of the above taking over half of the majority there.
Excellent. Not surprising at all. Thank you, Tarek. So now, with completion of that set of poll questions, I'd like to hand over to my colleague here, Evie Cohen. And Evie, if you could take us through a little bit more about how you see these challenges with business process automation and how Appian may play a role.
Excellent, thank you. And one other thing to point about the results was not only was all of the above, but your prediction about the next in line was also true as far as the results that came in. So look, we're talking about digital transformation, and folks would ask me, what do you mean digital transformation? Haven't we been transforming digitally for the past few decades? And the answer is yes, but I think we are really at a different point today where all of the digital systems have actually gotten to the point that they overwhelm us, and we don't have a good way to actually orchestrate, and we have very solid solutions in various different silos, acting and doing very well to support functions, but yet the overall end-to-end view is now getting masked through all that wealth of information and data. And most of what people are complaining about is the time it takes them to actually find that information, to find the knowledge, to actually search and get that information. When we looked at information about how companies are currently dealing with digital transformation, 87% of the companies that were polled actually indicating that they have a plan to deal with digital transformation in 2017. 54% of those indicated that digital transformation is actually the #1 corporate priority in 2017. I would ask yourself, are you part of those that answered in that regard? And do we really believe that that's, indicative of where we are today? We also know that currently the IT resources required to maintain where we are or even advance us forward are taking on about 80% of the resources. 20% are then left to look at new ways of dealing with things and innovation in the IT. Much of that is because we have insufficient agility at where we are today. Many of you know it takes a long time to ask for a request to change something in an existing system, or even the selection and implementation of a new system is also months, if not a couple of years of a project. We see a lot of silos still in place. Through the systems we use, we actually exacerbate that issue, and we create more and more silos as we advance. And the other challenge is scarce developer resources. There are not enough folks that are able to support and provide the implementations and the foresight we need to actually move ahead within our companies. And that's an area that requires some additional focus. A recent excellent article by McKinsey in February of this year, The Case for Digital Reinvention, which I actually utilize a couple of other nice data points out of, have indicated that the significant areas of barriers are exactly what is shown here on the screen. Lack of digital experience and skills that came out in the previous study that I showed on the previous slide as well. Competing departments where everybody's pulling in their direction and there's no real cohesive strategy for digital transformation. Organization inertia and functional departments moving in the direction they already headed, and it's very difficult to change that train or move it to a different track. Functional silos are creating barriers, so we have invested a lot in enabling those functions, but we haven't invested in the interfaces between those functions. And the lack of unified vision, exactly, kind of tying it all together. And then there's a few other less prominent issues that come up in barriers, but nonetheless as important. Another interesting conclusion of the same study, and the study is available online for you to go ahead and download, was what I actually found here, and I'm not going to try to explain, these, complex, graphs. However, the bottom left part of the graphs here, of the 6, the bottom left is actually what is really of interest. The study itself looked at the potential effects of full digitization on economic performance. They tried to link revenues and EBIT growth to the digitization rate, and the conclusion was that of all the different spaces and areas you can actually invest in, the biggest bang for your buck is going to come from digitization of supply chain. Very interesting to find out that indeed carries the most value for a company, yet we can see that today the investment or the time we spend in that area is limited. Actually, it's at the bottom of this slide right here. 2% of our forward-looking work in the digitization is being done in the supply chain area. So the area which could carry the highest revenue potential and impact on revenue potential and EBIT is actually the one we're focusing on less. A lot of the work has been done indeed in marketing and distribution, and maybe because of that, time to actually start looking and focusing in other directions. Overall, we really should be looking at platforms that enable moving faster, creating agility within the organization, and being able to drive innovation more. Taking some of that 80% of the overall maintenance resources and being able to transfer them and moving them over to creating the future of where we want to go from an IT perspective. And really, folks should be looking for platforms that make it easier to build, test, and learn. to go ahead and fail fast, to build an application, identify that it's actually not serving its purpose, move on to the next one, identify that that one is working, and beyond that, the ability to leverage capabilities, the ability to leverage big data and connect it to your processes within the organization. The additional value of being able to do so and connecting your various different functions is going to be in accelerating your time to market through digital transformation, and now finally connecting what is currently good existing solid solutions but in silos. The ability to look at an end-to-end process and connect the data, make it available, make decisions based upon it, is going to allow you to actually accelerate the process. It really has to do with starting with the best ingredients. You need to find software that fits the process, not the other way around. Highly configurable solutions are what's going to really drive the speed, so low code or no code solutions. You're looking for simple interfaces, simple user interfaces where you don't have to spend a lot of time teaching people and getting them back into the classroom every time, but rather it's intuitive. And where you can build unlimited applications, where you don't have to think every time you want to build something, what is the cost, what is the maintenance cost, but rather you have a platform and you can build, test, learn, fail fast, move on, and continue adjusting as you go. That definitely requires potentially going into the cloud because relying on on-premise still has a lot of challenges from a perspective of the speed of implementation. And then, of course, social enterprise and mobility is the other part here. We're now getting to the point where folks need to be able to touch each other across the organization, across geographies, and also not have to be tied to a desk, and that requires both social enterprise and mobility. Digital transformation has the potential to accelerate time to market for our industry. With that said, it's really about being able to have a platform that builds applications quickly in various different spaces and then connecting them by tying additional capabilities to existing systems that floats information to other systems and creates that ability to share information across systems, which currently is challenged, and a lot of us are using Excel glue and SharePoint capabilities to try and facilitate that, but it's really time to put Excel aside. Even though we can still use Excel for some aspects, it's not a good tool for creating these connectivity and making sure that we have the information available online, real time in front of us. And lastly, it's about not just tying and connecting those, but actually tying those into overall cohesive systems where CRM can be connected to your PLM system and communicate with the ERPs or enterprise resource planning system. And at the end of the day, if we're talking, for example, the example of quality assurance, we don't need individuals at that end point to start looking at 10 different systems to get information. It's floated in front of them. They have what they need to actually be able to approve a batch and move on and accelerate the speed at which we work. It's really about accelerating transformation in these several categories here. The overall customer journey, the business operations, which includes supply chain, and then governance and risk and compliance. From our perspective, it really comes down to this cycle here of awareness, knowledge, and action. You become aware of an opportunity or some sort of a problem that currently usually happens via email or somebody actually walking by, or mostly via email today. You get alerted of something. Then the next step for you is to actually acquire knowledge about that problem or opportunity, and that in itself is very challenging because you go into multiple different sources. You might actually wait for a spreadsheet to be sent to you from somebody that you believe holds some of that information. You might be waiting for access to another information system that you might not have access to today, and maybe a report coming out of that. and that in itself could take weeks, sometimes days, sometimes even weeks. And then finally, when you have all the information, maybe you've attended a couple of meetings, you have to take action. And that cycle, if it can be shortened, and especially if we can shorten the knowledge acquisition part of the cycle, we could actually see ourselves making faster decisions, reacting to emergencies and to urgent matters much faster. And that's where BPM comes in. It's really about being fast and powerful. The fast aspect of it is really about what I mentioned earlier, being able to build applications quickly, launch them into a production environment. Yes, validation will have to accommodate, and we have to find ways to actually develop validation doctrines and methodologies that meet the Agile requirements rather than hamper them. You don't want to be in an Agile project and then have to spend 4 months doing validation. Validation should have already been taken care of as part of your sprints as you move ahead, and maybe there's another month at the end to kind of close things up, but you need to make sure that attention to that aspect of it is taken care of appropriately, and that fast failing is really key here. Of course, it's about making sure that you understand the fast way to manage the overall process, running investigations, managing incidents, fulfilling, service requests, process decisions that have to be made. You better find a solid platform that can support managing all of these different functions, all of these different areas, and dealing with it from a case management perspective, which can accelerate your ability to become more agile within your organization. Another example here, Appian has worked with a company called Pirelli. I know this is outside of our pharma space, but it's a very, very nice example of a project that they called Decomplexify, where the intent and the goal was to actually connect several SAP instances and a couple of other ERP instances that existed at the time that the company was looking to continue doing its acquisitions and continue accelerating its growth and delivery. And it was really about connecting all of these together, bringing information to the folks that need it when they need it, and simplifying the work across the organization. Another nice use case is currently the MHRA, so the Medicines and Health Authorities in the UK, are going through a digital transformation. In the past, they were utilizing a 13-year-old IT outsourcing contract. IT was basically building estates and silos across the organization. The intent was to take these 64 distinct different case management systems and try to bring them into one specific area. They're utilizing Appian to actually migrate and decommission some of the other workflows and bring them into one specific unified space. I think one of the key quotes that we heard from the folks is the platform that is also an influential partner, and not just the platform itself, but also the folks that support and provide them the capabilities is what's important. Trying to join up the various different customer experiences for citizens that are going into MHRA's websites, as well as for any individuals at pharma companies that then are interacting with the agency. We talked about fast, powerful. So the powerful aspect is indeed the ability to start building applications one after the other. And an example here is a large multinational company in Europe that has started with small implementations dealing with Form 1572 in the clinical space, but then went on to study startup, site initiation, et cetera. And the whole idea is about really starting to build a solid application based on connecting these multiple opportunities and multiple solutions together on one unified platform. And the same company also dealt with multiple different sources for their discovery and preclinical compounds, and managing about 8 million different compounds across the 20 different laboratories in 5 fulfillment centers, and having several databases that were in place to manage that. The decision in front of them was whether they go ahead and upgrade each one of those databases or utilize a platform to try and connect everything together, including the ability to connect to the outside world and bring various different academic institutions to the data that they were gathering, and thereby connecting scientists, both internally and externally. It's really about looking at your business, from a different perspective and saying, look, I have multiple different stores of data, different functions, different areas, but I need to be able to orchestrate across the board and create what we at Appian call a record, which is the entity that, if it's a product or a clinical trial or people or manufacturing sites, you name it, those records need to be able to have folks interact and come together from various different areas and functions, and each may need to take different actions on those. Yet the data related to and supporting those actions and related to that knowledge you need to acquire may reside in enterprise applications, some in the cloud, some in other databases. You need to be able to connect them all together. It's about what I mentioned earlier, the end-to-end view and being able to look across. If it's end-to-end across 3 or 4 functions or end-to-end across 10 functions, it's really about being able to leverage the ability to float information in front of people quickly and in a unified environment, using mobile and running in the cloud, which then limits the overhead on your own IT resources and probably accelerates the ability to work. It's about creating a platform and having a platform that allows the business and IT folks to actually work together, where in quick 2-week sprints, you can build something, put it in front of the user. It's a workable solution. Maybe it's not the full solution you were looking to actually implement. It definitely won't be in 2 weeks, but every 2 weeks you can actually deliver additional functionality and get feedback, test, evaluate, move on, and start building additional capabilities as you grow and as you move on in the project. And it's about taking these type of projects from what used to be 2-3 year implementations down to weeks, maybe months, but really accelerating the way we actually work between IT and the business together. And there's 4 areas where digital opportunity exists. Delivery of more personalized patient care, engagement, with fully engaging with physicians and patients, using data to drive superior insight and decision-making internally, and then the transformation of your business processes, real-time responsiveness of IT to the business. I would say that all of these opportunities exist within our companies and need to gain our attention. I had a chance to meet Jessica Federer last year at DIA. She is the head of digital development at Bayer, and I loved one of the statements that she gave in her talk. It was basically, if we do digital right, then we should stop talking about digital, and that's so true. We should be advancing to the point where we're no longer talking about digital transformation. It's part of what we do. It's how we work. And with that, I'm going to close with this one slide over here that really is almost like a call to action. Which are the following areas likely to be your organization's top business priorities over the next 12 months? Don't need to answer this. We're actually going to have a polling question in a minute, but it's really more about, can you answer this for yourself? And I would point out that creating a comprehensive digital marketing strategy and creating a comprehensive strategy to address digital technology like mobile, social, and smart products seem to have actually taken a lower part. It's really more improving the product services through digitization, improving operational efficiencies, and improving experience of your customers, which become truly important. And with that, I'll turn back to Tariq for our next polling question, please.
Thank you very much. That's right. Now it's time for the second poll question we'll be running today. Audience members, if you could please once again, please select the answer that's most relevant to you from the options below and hit that submit button. The question is, When I implement a digital platform for business process automation, I want to, the options are solve specific critical business problems, design and deploy a solution in weeks, not months, implement a cost-effective solution, establish a digital platform that can address multiple business challenges, or all of the above. So the options once more are solve specific critical business problems, design and deploy a solution in weeks, not months, implement a cost-effective solution, establish a digital platform that can address multiple business challenges, or all of the above. Evie, maybe you could talk a bit about what you're expecting to see as a result here.
I think again here, it's probably going to be all of the above. I would say if the next one in line, I would probably say that folks would not consider that to be the answer, but I would have said design and deploy a solution in weeks, not months. The reason I would guess that will actually get a low score is because we come at it from the perspective of where we have been, and we're looking at it from the perspective of that's magic. Building a solution in weeks, I mean, that's not heard of, especially in the highly regulated space in pharma. How could that happen? But I think we have no choice but to actually move in that direction today. The companies that are going to be able to deploy solutions fast, utilize the methodology of build, test, learn, and repeat, are going to be the ones that are going to be with us another 5-10 years from now. Those that are unable and are going to be much more sluggish are slowly going to find themselves like Kodak, left behind and almost on the outside. Back to you, Tariq.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and see those results. Before that, though, I wanted to remind everyone we will be hosting a Q&A session shortly, so please go ahead and get your questions in while you can. We'll go and answer a couple of those at the end. So here's the results now. Thank you very much for taking part. And yes, so we've got all of the above in first place there. Back to you, Evie.
Yeah, I mean, so indeed, this is not surprising, right? All of the above, yes, then establish a digital platform that can address multiple business challenges. Basically, it looks like what the audience is considering is what's in front of them. Yes, I mean, that's definitely what we want. What they did not consider, like I guessed, was that, designing and deploying in weeks actually got 0. But yet, in my opinion, that's definitely the place we need to be. You need to fail fast. We need to move innovation forward. With that, I will turn back to Wayne for closing with a few more items here, and I think we have our last polling question after that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Evie. So I made reference earlier on that I was going to shine a bit of a spotlight on lot release management, and by this we really mean whether it's raw materials, intermediates, or finished product. The process that we go through today between operations, QC, QA, supply chain, regulatory, all the groups that are involved in making sure that we can successfully release material from its kind of in-process or quarantined stage successfully to a finished goods release stage. And again, just to make sure that we set the stage appropriately here, multiple functions involved in this complex business process. We've got internal and external manufacturing, QA, QC, supply chain, finance, regulatory perhaps. There's a multitude of data and documents involved here, from the batch records that are used to guide manufacturing to any in-process test results, deviation investigations, a lot of the records that go along with what we've proved for facility readiness, environmental acceptance, and then of course all the test results that go along with it. I think it's interesting here if you go through any typical, for example, pharmaceutical or biotech company and survey the number of systems that get involved in these processes. I've listed generic system names here. I actually think this list is perhaps a few systems short in terms of the number of systems, but it only highlights the point that when it comes time to try to gather, review, conduct any rework processes, resolve any discrepancies and deviations. The number of systems, the number of data and documents, the number of functional touch points, the number of combinations that we have to work through here are really incredible. And I think it really does, in one picture, shine a light on the opportunity we have, to apply a digital cloud-based approach to making this a much more seamless, fast, less prone to error process than we have today. In fact, if I leave this picture up and just ask you a few questions, for those of you who are familiar with these types of processes, how often, when you think about what you go through to try to test and release products and move it from one stage, for example, quarantine to finished goods, how often would you like to be able to establish a relationship between the lot that was manufactured and all the related data such as suppliers or the manufacturing step? How often would you like to have better communication and collaboration, either internally or with your contract manufacturers, as you go through the batch record review? How often would you say, it'd be nice to have a dashboard so I can see where some of these lots are in the various stages of review or release? How often would you say, I'd like to be able to really at least get a report, if not conduct some really good analytics here? And finally, how often would you say, I'd really prefer not to have to go to all those multiple systems to move from one step of the process to another as I try to release product? It would be nice if I had one landing place where we all could go collaborate and move products through from one stage of test and review to the next. So with that in mind, let's think about what we're really trying to achieve here in terms of efficient kind of collaborative lot release management. We really need to first, I think, enhance and improve the user experience by presenting all of the key data, having a link to all of the key documents with the corresponding analytics and reporting in really an enhanced way. Again, taking out the need to go to multiple systems independently, but presenting everything in one place. And so that multiple functions can access all of the key data and documents in, we can call it near real time, but near real time even is going to be a vast improvement over what we have, while minimizing the opportunities for the errors in transcription of data and information, the sheer number of errors that are possible, all in an environment that I would consider content-rich, intuitive, user-friendly, and one that really facilitates the review, the resolution of errors and deviations, and ultimately the collaborative release of products from one stage to the next. Because ultimately, this does become one of the critical bottlenecks to responding to the challenges that I laid out back when I was introducing this topic overall. When we think about the criticality of time to market, when we think about the criticality of speed, but also speed and now cost, those are all drivers, I think, for this move toward this digitally enabled cloud-based approach to solving these critical business processes. And I think lot release management is a great example of that. So Tarek, I think we're up here on our last polling question, but maybe you can step us through that, and then we can open up to the broader Q&A as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And this is the third and final poll we'll be running today. So audience members, please, for the third time, go ahead and select the answer that's most relevant to you and hit submit. And this question is, there is opportunity for adoption of digital business process automation platform for the following: clinical trial supply and execution, regulatory submission and approval tracking, contract manufacturing collaboration and management, testing, batch record review and release of products, or all of the above. So please do go ahead and select whichever option you think is the answer and hit submit. So Wayne, I just wanted to see if you could maybe provide a bit more context here, tell the audience a bit more about it, or just about what you expect to see as well.
Well, I think, Tarek, those of us knowledgeable of and experienced in operations can really I think, identify and associate with some of the execution-related topics that we have up here. One area really interesting area of growing concern is this notion of regulatory submission and approval tracking. I'm seeing a number of medium and large pharmaceutical and biotech companies really focused on the integration of either the initial commercialization activities or the post-commercial variations activities, all of which require refiling, reapproval, or either initial or refiling and reapproval in 100 plus jurisdictions and countries around the world. So I wouldn't be surprised if I see more interest in regulatory submission and approval tracking. Let's see if I can go 2 for 2 here.
Okay, let's go ahead and have a look at those results now. Thank you to everybody who decided to take part. And well, okay, so all of the above winning there with a landslide, and the second one is testing batch record review and release of products.
So I went 1 for 2.
Not bad at all.
So, Tarek, is now the time we open up for a broader Q&A?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So thank you very much, and a reminder for the audience now, we are going to begin answering our questions here. So if you would like to submit another question, go ahead and do that. You can do that by typing it into the box at the top left-hand corner of the screen and hitting that submit button. So we're going to get to some of these questions that we've already received, and keep those questions coming in. We'll try to get to as many as we have time for. So this first question here is, what are some of the pharma and biotech industry dynamics that are driving manufacturers to consider cloud-based platforms such as cloud-based BPM?
Yeah, Tarek or Evie, I can take that first, and then Evie, maybe get some of your perspectives as well. I mentioned some of the macro drivers before about really increasing speed to market in an environment where regulations continue to mount and increase and make it more difficult to bring products to market or to file those variations, for example. I also referenced competition, but those macro drivers are going to be there. When I work with individual companies within different sectors of life sciences, something else I see here is there's a real need to kind of rationalize the system landscape that support all these business processes, and also decrease the cost that's required to both implement and maintain those system landscapes. And I think, again, that's where the door is open for cloud-based, digital-based solutions, and also not only to meet the needs of people who are working within the 4 walls of our plants or our corporate campuses, but really to connect the mobile workforce as well. So that's why I see some of the drivers there.
Lovely, thank you very much. Moving straight into another question. Do keep those questions coming in, by the way. This question is, how good is Appian for these regulatory submission? Any case studies to prove the theory?
Evie, that sounds like it's for you.
Yeah, let me see. So I'm looking at. I'm sorry. This is the how good is Peter? Which question was that again? Sorry about that.
How good is Appian for these regulatory submission? Any case studies to prove the theory?
Okay. So definitely, use cases exist about, in abundance. The work that we've done with, several large pharma companies, ourselves, points that. I think our competition as well is, heavily involved. You would find that, both cloud solutions, from either Veeva or, Pega in the space are definitely advancing. However, I would say that our ability to work quickly, fast, and deploy powerful solutions in the space is helping to accelerate the work. Much of the challenges have to do with going across various different geographies, looking at submissions in the portfolio from a perspective of both local, regional, and then global. And much of that ability is today hampered by the fact that systems may have been implemented in the US and Europe, et cetera, but not expanded well into some of the other rest of world areas. However, many of the studies are occurring in that space. many of the initial implementation, initial launches might be in that space, and there's a lot of value that comes from understanding and building your, I guess, data on the basis of some submissions in the rest of the world, yet we find ourselves stuck with a lot of Excel-based information. It's time to actually move ahead from that and implement, business process management capabilities to really bring the data forward, connect it to the people, and establish a strong process that actually drives how we work in that space.
Thank you very much. Moving into the next question we have here, how would PwC typically help companies understand where best to apply cloud-based BPM and how to get started?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Very often, regardless of ultimate system or systems that enable processes, we're typically the front end of evaluating how processes run today and helping companies really go through and map out a streamlined, optimized set of processes that are going to meet one or more really key and critical objectives. And then going from business process definition, going into evaluate a series of technologies that will help enable, help the brand owner or manufacturer select the right technologies, and then help them implement as well. So again, it's really from initial strategy all the way through execution and implementation is where we typically play a role in helping companies optimize business processes, but then also enable them as well.
Thank you very much. This question now is, what are some of the most complicated challenges you've seen Appian solve in life sciences from a business process perspective and from a technology or integration perspective?
Excellent question as well. I would actually say it's the example I gave previously in the previous answer, RIM, so Regulatory Information Management. The space is very large. It does bring together multiple functions from a business process management. It's challenging because we're also looking at not just a portfolio in a certain geography, but across geographies and at certain different levels. So bringing together a portfolio that manages both local, then regional, and global applications. And for a company, that's extremely difficult to do. To get the visibility across those and get it across, 100 or plus, countries is one of the biggest challenges to, both from a data perspective, but also from a process perspective. And indeed, the project that we have implemented with a large pharma company took a little bit more than a few weeks. It actually was a few months in that case, just showing how complex and how challenging it was. From a perspective of technology and integration, it's indeed some of those areas where multiple systems need to be connected to and integrations into a CTMS as well as a regulatory management system as well as an ERP system. Those are probably the most challenging areas where we have seen ourselves play and have successfully connected to the systems bidirectionally, so not just pulling information and floating it, but also being able to actually write back to those databases, of course, with the right permissions and security and the diligence to make sure that we're not updating any information that shouldn't be updated by our system. Back to you, Tariq.
Thank you very much. And I'm afraid that's all the time we have left today. Thank you for all of your questions, and I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but that just leaves me to thank today's speakers, Evie and Wayne, for what was a brilliant presentation. I'm sure you'll all agree. And of course, to thank Appian for sponsoring this session. To all the attendees, you will receive an email very shortly telling you how you can access the on-demand version of this webinar. You can also access it directly through our website. The website is www.business-process business-review-webinars.com. And we do look forward to sharing further webinars with you, so please do keep an eye out on the website I just mentioned. Follow us on Twitter. We are at BRWebinars, and we do update that daily. And of course, you're free to join our LinkedIn group as well, Business Review Webinars. Thank you all once again, and I hope you all have a lovely day.